Hello all, welcome back to Intentional Grounding, our football podcast, and where this week we're talking about the second half of the first round of the mock draft. I am Tyler Spittle, joined by our co-host Mike Weir Jr. and Costa Vianes.
Tyler is still continuing this attempt
Well, I thought you
host
guys
the
left.
show all by himself.
I thought you guys left.
We said we would leave for the after this, Tyler.
Yeah.
So anyway, in case you missed it, in our first part, we gave our
and
mock.
if you did, shame on you.
We
Go
gave
ahead.
our mock draft. We gave our mock drafts for the first 16 picks of the since the NFL draft is next week, and you can go back and check that out to catch up. We're going to start at pick 17 here, and we're going to go down the rest of the first round. So Costa, how about you start off? Give us your 17 to 20.
All right, so at number 17, I have the Ravens getting Eric Ebron. I have him slipping through the cracks and getting to 17. At 18, I have the Jets taking Odell Beckham Jr. At 19, I have the Dolphins taking Marquise Lee. And 20, I have the Cardinals taking Ryan Shazier.
Shazier.
I don't know, however you want to pronounce it. Yeah.
Okay.
That linebacker from Ohio State.
That linebacker. I have the Ravens taking Jerry Rice Cake. How in the world he fell this far in the draft, we have no clue. No? Okay.
No.
Anyway, I'm in line with the thought that Ebron has slipped this far to the Ravens. The Ravens get a dynamic tight end to add to their core and probably replace Owen Daniels in a year or two. Well, probably 1 year. Then following that, the Jets, yes, they need cornerbacks, but I think at this point it's a good time for them to get a wide receiver. They get Marquise Lee, who's still on the board and still a pretty highly touted receiver at this point. I have the Dolphins taking Zach Martin at this point because they need offensive line help. Ryan Tannehill got sacked more times than any quarterback last year. So that's definitely a need that the Dolphins, and from what I've heard, Martin is one of the safest picks of this draft. So kind of can't go wrong there. And then I'm also in line with the Shazier going to the Cardinals.
All right. So for me, if you've been following along, I gave Ebron to the Bills earlier, so he unfortunately is not falling in my mock draft. Of course, I hope in the real draft he does. I have the Ravens taking that safe pick, Zach Martin at tackle, because they need to shore up their right tackle spot.
Yep.
Jets, I agree with you, are in taking Odell Beckham Jr. I was considering giving them a corner, but decided against it at the last minute. Dolphins, I have them taking Brandon Cooks, and then finish up. We're all in agreement with the Cardinals taking Ryan Shazier.
I think at this point in the draft, when you have the Dolphins, I think are a team in this scenario because I for whatever reason I just can't imagine Zach Martin, who is I guess ranked as the lesser of the top four offensive linemen, slipping that far down. Because if he gets to the Ravens at 17, they have to decide between Ebron and Martin. That's going to be a tough choice, but I think based on their actual needs, they would probably lean more towards Martin, maybe.
The Ravens are tended to go best player available.
Well, that too, But I think in this case, if someone like Martin doesn't slip down to 19, I do think, I had them taking Marquise Lee, but I think the Dolphins are probably a team that would consider trading back in that scenario because the next best offensive lineman that would be available, I don't think necessarily carry a value at number 19. So they would probably trade back towards the bottom of just for like a team like say like the Panthers that are in desperate need of a wide receiver and might not get the guy they want, and they would want to desperately move up to try and get that guy. And when it comes to trying to predict what wide receivers go where, there's so many of them. I mean, I have Beckham Jr. You had Marquise Lee.
I had Marquise Lee. Just because at this point he was the top one on my draft board.
See, the reason, I originally, when I did this initially, I had Marquise Lee going to the Jets. Honestly, I have him going the very next pick at 19. But Lee had dropped down a bit because he was the consensus number 3 guy after Watkins and Evans. But he didn't exactly have a great pro day, or a combine. But his pro day apparently was really good though. He kind of made up for his poor performance. But I think that lack of consistency might maybe drop him down a little bit. So maybe whatever happens there with him. So Marquise Lee might be a guy that could go 18, 19 or slip down to the early to mid 20s.
Yep, I agree with you. Should we move on?
Yes. So, Mike, since you're looking over at my laptop, of course.
You're at 50% on your laptop. I'm at 8, so I think you're good for a while.
Since you just stole my charger, why don't you just go ahead and take the picks from the Packers. Oh, no, not to the darn. It goes from the Packers to the Bengals. The next would have been a charge. That would have been a great segue.
Oh.
Darn it, draft order. Yes.
Okay, so I had Green Bay taking Anthony Barr by this point because.
Oh wow, wow.
Yeah, he. Remember, I'm the wild and wacky draft.
I actually hadn't noticed that you hadn't had Barr off your draft board yet.
Hey,
wow.
That when I looked at this, that is one of those that I was considering like removing around, but just based on how I thought everything might fall down, that's just the best spot I had for him. So I had Anthony Barr there. I had Kelvin Benjamin going to the Eagles. More offensive help for them. And this is where I had Darquise Dennard falling to, was to the Chiefs.
Okay.
Because the Chiefs definitely need some corner help. And,
I mean, very possible. If Pittsburgh doesn't take him, then he's going to slip really far down in the draft.
And then right after, I have the Bengals taking Bradley Roby because they desperately need corners. Their corners are old or like Terrence Newman and somebody else. And Drake Kirkpatrick, but they could still use another corner.
So for me, I have the Packers getting C.J. Mosley. The Eagles follow up with Darquise Dennard, one pick earlier than you have him. I have the Chiefs taking Xavier Suafalu, however you pronounce that.
I think that was pretty good pronunciation.
Yeah, not bad.
and then finally having the Bengals also taking Bradley Roby. For the year, although between. For a cornerback at that position, I had between him and Kyle Fuller. But the consensus I was reading was that Roby was possibly slightly better, and although the knocks against him have been some character issues, it's the Bengals. Like they've batted an eye at character issues before.
Yeah, that's true. They'd be willing to take a chance.
Yep. For me, I also have C.J. Mosley going at 21 to the Packers. I think Mosley, I guess, is kind of like, because you had Mosley going really early in your draft, Mike, and people have been talking about Mosley slipping down into the late teens a bit, and so I figured there wasn't really any team that popped up the Cardinals need a linebacker, but I think Shazier probably fit their needs more. So Mosley goes to the Packers at 21. I have Brandon Cooks going to the Eagles at 22. Like, he fits into Chip Kelly's offense so well. That fast, like, he basically would fill the role that is left by when they cut Deshaun Jackson. He's that really fast, athletic, dynamic wide receiver. And, I actually think that if the Panthers were to, do that trade up like I kind of envision, that Cooks would probably be the wide receiver they would target. But I have the Eagles taking Cooks at 22. I have Kelvin Benjamin going to the Chiefs at 23. And I have Kyle Fuller going 24 to the Bengals, getting their corner. So, I mean, we all basically agree what the Bengals will probably do at that spot. And, why this is, a couple wide receivers will go. And, that's what we're getting up on. We're getting on our run of wide receivers now over these last, 8-9 picks.
I mean, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Agree with everything you said.
I mean, Kelvin Benjamin also for the Chiefs. I mean, he's a guy that people talk about. He could possibly slip out of the first round, which I just don't see happening. I
think with that run of teams that are going to need wide receivers by the end of that first round.
Yeah, and especially, and we were talking about this before about the wide receiver side and how there's no consensus on what order to go except for the top three are more or less the same, or actually the top two, as of course to reiterate Watkins and Evans, and then after that the next three between Lee, Beckham, and Cooks. And then after that, you have Kelvin Benjamin, which has been like higher up, but then it's just fallen down. With like Lee and Cook. So it's going to be really interesting. All right, Costa, give us your Who you have the Chargers picking at 25?
Chargers, I have them taking Cyrus Kuingio, the offensive lineman. I think they definitely need to shore up that front a bit. They also need secondary help. But I think they might consider going offensive line here. At 26, I have the Browns taking Teddy Bridgewater. I have him because he seems to be the consensus of like the quarterbacks of the guy has the most potential to slip, in the draft. And if he's there at 26, I don't think the Browns they don't have any reason to not take him unless they prefer a guy like an AJ McCarron or a Jimmy Garoppolo. At 27, I have the Saints taking Bradley Roby. And the Panthers, who, again, I don't believe they'll draft this spot, but if they do and they don't get the wide receiver they want, they'll go Jason Verrett, the corner, at 28.
Okay. I think, none of my picks are in line with yours. I had the Chargers taking Kyle Fuller because, they also need that help in that area. I had the Browns taking A.J. McCarron at this spot because they've shown a history of drafting QBs like late in the first round, and obviously Brandon Weeden wasn't a thrilling success.
If the Browns, at least based on what I have, like I said, you have Bridgewater going to the Titans at 11, and I have him going at 26. For whatever reason, if the Browns decide that they prefer McCarron there, Bridgewater's going to slip. Like, no one else near again, but then that's the scenario where then a team sees that, and then someone who didn't take their quarterback at the top is going to trade right. Maybe the Titans still get Bridgewater, and they're like, he's still there. Maybe we got to trade back in and get Bridgewater.
And that's fair. That's totally possible. And, I did read some scenarios that have, the Texans getting, Clowney in round 1 and then, McCarron in round 2, but I have a stronger belief that McCarron slips up into the first round.
Well, he's either going to be an end of the first round or a first 4 pick in the second round. Right. Either way, he's going.
Mm-hmm. So then after that, I had the Saints taking Odell Beckham because why not add to your prolific passing attack?
And again, you just never know where these wide receivers are going to go. There's so many of them.
This was the hardest, especially once you got past those first few. It's this is literally, we're just throwing, darts. It's just okay, you, there. All right. And then Panthers take Brandon Cooks because, again, just this wide receiver quandary. And I think the Panthers have to get a wide receiver now. They have to jump at somebody now at this point because they're in a sucky position in this draft. And they're in a sucky position of giving up their entire receiving core. Now, and I just saw this the other day. You know what team went to the playoffs one year, made it pretty far, but then got rid of their entire receiving core, and then had pretty bad seasons after that? The Jets. And the Panthers have followed this route. They won their division, they made it into the playoffs, and then they gave up their receiving
Which is why I fully expect, because I just can't imagine Brandon Cook slipping past the Eagles, because he fits their system just way too well.
And that's fair. And
which is why if the Panthers want to get a guy like Cooks, or really any of the other wide receivers, they're going to have to trade up. They're going to have to, because then at that point they're going to be reaching for someone if they decide to take a wide receiver at 28. Granted, like I said, it's so the wide receiver class is just so deep. You could argue that they could take someone who isn't necessarily someone that might be projected as a second round pick and make the argument that they could be an end of the first round guy. Mm-hmm. But, if they want a difference maker at wide receiver right away, they're going to have to move up somewhere within the top 20 to get a guy like that at wide receiver. Because then if they get someone else probably later, then they're looking at someone who could come in and be like their number 2 or number 3 guy, but they really don't have anybody. Jericho Cotchery is their number 1 wide receiver. So they'll have to make some sort of splash. Or not necessarily a splash, but they'll have to obviously make a move upward.
Alright, so for my picks, I have the Chargers also getting Kyle Fuller. Here I have the Browns actually getting Marquise Lee. Now, my reasoning is that since the Browns will be picking again about 10 picks later, I feel like by that point, I'm of the opinion that Bridgewater will completely slip down to the second round. And so I feel like when the Browns pick again in the their first pick of the second round, they're going to have their options of either Bridgewater or McCarron, or possibly, maybe have to trade up a few picks for it, but I feel like they can get one of them in the second round. The Chiefs, I have them taking Jason Verrett, and then to finish out the wide receiver quandary, I have the Panthers taking Kelvin Benjamin as their help at wide receiver.
I mean, again, Benjamin he could fall down to he's, of all the wide receivers, he is probably the most likely that could slip down to the Panthers at 28 if they don't decide to try and move up to get a guy that they would really want.
Yep. Yeah, I very much don't disagree with any of that.
All right, so in that
My 2 cents. There you go.
In that case, let's finish this up with the last 4 picks of the 2014 intentional grounding mock drafts.
Good try.
So at 29, I have the Patriots taking Stephon Tuitt. At 30, I have the 49ers taking Rashid Hagman. 31, Broncos take DeMarcus Lawrence. And at 32, the Super Bowl champions Seattle Seahawks get Joel Bitonio.
I have also Stephon Tuitt going at 29 to the Patriots. Now, for the 49ers, I was torn between DeMarcus Lawrence and Rashid Hagman, but I decided they go with Lawrence because Jim Harbaugh really likes those really big, athletic defensive players, and I think Lawrence probably fits that a little bit more. So I have him going at 30. The Broncos lost Zane Beadles, one of Peyton Manning's better offensive linemen, to free agency. So I think this is where Xavier Suafilo goes at 31. And at 32, I have the Seahawks taking Jordan Matthews. So one last wide receiver for all good intentions for this round, going at 32 to the Seahawks because they lost Golden Tate. So maybe they get a guy to fill his spot.
Okay, I mean, most of mine are in line with everybody else's. Patriots taking Stephon Tuitt. By the way, these last 4 are like the weirdest names of this draft. Just saying. DeMarcus Lawrence to the 49ers, just like you said.
Oh, yeah, that's so crazy.
Well, that one maybe not, but the other 3, Tyler, like this one, Xavier Suafilo. Did I say that right?
I don't know. I don't even know if I said it right.
Suafilo.
I'm just calling it Suafilo.
Suafilo.
It might be like Suafilo or
yeah,
something
probably.
like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's how it looks like it's written here. Suafilo. But anyway, so remember Ishmael Kitchen a few years ago? Anyway, and then I do have the Seahawks also taking Joel Bitonio. See? Weird name too. I'm just calling that the weird name group. Sounds like a band name.
The weird
name group.
No, it had to be like Mike Warrior in the weird name group.
Hey!
Hey, you came up with the band.
You had to throw a shot in there.
I mean, we've still got a little bit of time to play with. I just wanted to maybe throw this out there, but what do you guys think will be like the one? Because we don't have any like really. We kind of discussed like what trades could happen, but like what's your like
discuss that more.
Huh?
We could discuss that more, of course.
Yeah, I mean we could discuss. But I was about to say, what is your like crazy out of this world like maybe unlikely to happen but could potentially be feasible move of the draft? Like if you had a thought, like what if this actually happened?
In that case, I'd probably go with Atlanta jumping up at 1, which I feel like the interesting thing about that is because 2 years ago, Redskins at 6 traded with the Rams at 2. That was the big trade for RG3, and gave up their next 3 first rounders. So for Atlanta to jump from 6 to 1, they'd have to even beat that. And of course, some people are saying that as far as like football talent wise, Jadeveon Clowney is a better football player than RG3 was back then.
Mm-hmm.
So, like if they actually make that jump for trade, Houston is going to benefit hugely.
Well, plus the other thing too, Jadeveon Clowney is working on like 3 years of hype. Like, they even said he could have, jumped to the NFL after his freshman year at South Carolina and still have been like a top 3 pick in the NFL draft. Like, he has been on this hype train for like the last 3 years, So unfortunately, that also means he is a candidate for like the crash and burn group. Like how badly does he look if he doesn't get like double-digit sacks in it, or if he doesn't even get like 7 sacks in his rookie season? If he gets like 4 or 5, and maybe he gets a forced fumble here and there or whatever. But Jadeveon Clowney is expected to come into this league and just set it on fire, and and be like the undoubted defensive rookie of the year and like the next great defensive lineman, Hall of Famer and all this stuff. It's a lot of pressure, and someone. Like I said earlier, he's going to go number 1 to somebody, whether it's the Texans or someone else that's willing to, pay out the what to move up and get him. Because, could you just imagine if the Texans just take someone else that's not Clowney? They don't trade. They take they take Manziel, at number 1, and then the Rams are sitting there.
Manziel number 1. That's. One of the most recent reports I had heard leading up in this week was that the Texans were considering either Jadeveon Clowney or Manziel. So when I did this, I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to stick to my guns. For a split second, I thought, maybe I'll change my pick, but no, I'm sticking to my guns. I think they will regret not drafting Manziel. I think they will. And even if they do draft back. Like you had proposed earlier, or trade back, earlier, to like and they could try to get him that way, but he would have to pass so many QB teams. If he falls to the Browns, I think the Browns are tempted at least, and then I don't think he goes past Oakland, if that's the case. Right, that's what I'm saying. So even if they were to trade with the Falcons, Manziel's probably gone before they even get that chance too. So they would have to trade again.
Well, see, again, it would be one of those scenarios where it would be like, if Houston were to trade back with somebody, then it might be a scenario where they might try and trade back up. Like if they're confident that, it really all depends. They would have
to if they want Manziel at that point.
It all depends on like because every team has done research on other teams, like what their draft possibilities are, and so like, are the Jaguars more likely to take Bortles or Manziel, or do they take like Sammy Watkins if he's there, or do they take Khalil Mack or whatever? They all these teams have that type of stuff like written down somewhere in their files while they're sitting in their draft rooms and stuff. I'm seriously like if Clowney does not go number 1 to the Texans, and either, like I said, either the Texans go Manziel and let Clowney just go and he drops, it's just going to really just change the whole course of the draft. Clowney and Manziel are literally the 2 guys that will decide how the rest of this draft goes.
And that's why my weird thing, or whatever, the subject that we're on right now, that's why I still think Manziel goes number 1.
See, I'll admit, like my draft board is rather bland, because this is like if everything goes as intended.
Same here, pretty much.
Yeah, there will be a trade that none of us have mentioned. Yeah. There will be, and then there will be another one.
And then there'll be teams reaching for players like I'm sure like there's going to be players that none of us considered drafting in the first round that get drafted.
Right. Well, remember when the Vikings traded back into the first round like twice? You're just never gonna know what happens until it actually happens. And and that's the thing. This is such a weird draft that no matter how the dominoes fall, it's going to be bizarre in some way or another. Could there be a run on receivers early? Or is the run on quarterbacks going to happen early or late? You know what I mean? It's going to be just bizarre to watch, and it's going to be ultimately fun to watch. This is why I don't like to predict the draft, honestly, because I like to just sit there and let it take me for a ride. Just be surprised. I'll have an idea of what this team might take, and then boom, trade. Nope, now everything's all screwed up.
Well,
and seeing teams panic and rush is awesome.
And honestly, the crazy thing is, like I said, this is one of those drafts where, with the guys that we've all mentioned that are taken, like it's basically any guy that's taken in the top 15, there's probably a legitimate argument for why that guy went where he did. Mm-hmm. I mean, because like I said, you occasionally get some picks that are like real head scratchers, like why in the hell did this guy go like 10 picks sooner than he should have, type of thing. But whenever in the top 15, like I said, the top 10, we have an idea of who's going in the top 10. It's just like in what order are they going to go?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's I honestly think we all. I mean, I know you have I have 2 quarterbacks in the top 10. You have what, 3 or how many quarterbacks?
I have pretty much all of them in the top.
With the exception, like Bridgewater's 11.
Yeah. Like Carr, I think I have the top 3: Manziel, Bortles, and Carr in the top 5. And in the top, and in the top 10.
These teams, because like I said, the mindset I have is that these teams are gonna. I don't think they're gonna want to gamble and take. As I said, unless the quarterback's name is Bortles or Manziel, I don't think they go in the top 10 unless the team is just supremely desperate. Like I know Carr and Bridgewater and all those guys, within their own right are really good prospects. But like I said, since all the other positions, a lot of the other positions are so thin, and these teams at the top have other needs other than quarterback, it's like you gotta consider it.
But the problem is though, the quarterback selection is not that deep though. Everywhere else might be, but quarterbacks are not. So if you're in a position like
quarterback is it depends, because like if you just go based on like like I said, Bortles, Manziel, Bridgewater, Carr, like McCarron, they got Garoppolo, but then you have like other guys who again, this is like every draft. You always have like a couple quarterbacks where like, they could be very serviceable quarterbacks, with some of course training and practice and down the road. Then you have guys like Aaron Murray and he was the first one that came to my mind, but guys that other teams, or was it a Mettenberger from LSU's another guy, so it's kind of like there are other guys that could go in like because essentially if a player's drafted within the first 3 rounds, there's the expectation of them being a starter some point down the line, even if it's a quarterback. I mean, Russell Wilson was a 3rd round pick, and he was a quarterback right out of after training camp.
But here's the problem though. Like, it also depends on their position in the draft. For example, a team like the Raiders, if they don't take the quarterback right away, let's say Jacksonville doesn't take a quarterback, or the Texans don't take a quarterback in round 1, then that means McCarron's off the board, Mettenberger or Garoppolo is off the board.
Mm-hmm.
So that leaves just one QB left. Like, are you really willing to take the chance of the QB you want not being there when you think he's going to be there? You have these picks. I understand the philosophy of garnering more picks, and I understand where you're coming from, absolutely. But my theory is that if you have a chance to take the best player on the board, you take him. And if that player falls in line with the need that you need, you also take him. You know what I mean? You try to draft the best player on the board, but you can't ignore needs either.
Well, right.
If you were fully stocked, the Patriots would not draft a quarterback if they were in, if they still have Tom Brady, but their defense sucked one year, and they're, drafting number 1. They're not going to pick the number 1 quarterback because they already have Tom Brady.
Well, but there are also discussions of teams like the Broncos and the Patriots looking to draft like the eventual successors too. So you're going to have teams that you wouldn't even think needed a quarterback necessarily, but they still are going to look, because this draft is so deep at quarterback. I mean, there are guys beyond the ones that we're talking about that teams like the Patriots and Broncos are going to take serious consideration in drafting.
But I feel like those are going to be the lesser known names, though. I doubt.
Not necessarily, because I would not be surprised if A.J. McCarron were to end up on a team like the Patriots.
I would be surprised.
Well,
I would be very surprised.
But you just never know, like, because A.J. McCarron could fit in a lot of different systems, but like for the teams that need a quarterback.
But for the Patriots to get him, they would have to draft him in round 1. they would have to trade up to make sure that
I think the Patriots have quite a few draft picks. There's always an opportunity they could probably trade up in the second round if McCarron weren't to make it.
But just to get a quarterback that you're still going to... Tom Brady wants to play until he's at least 40 and longer. So you're going to draft a quarterback in your first round to have him sit on his butt for 5 years?
That's what the Packers did.
Yeah, I know, that's not commonplace now.
Well, it's not, but if you had a quarterback that could take a few years to learn behind a Tom Brady and a Peyton Manning, they're going to be the most well-prepared quarterbacks coming in. I mean, no doubt. I mean, this draft is just going to be a carousel on draft.
That is true. I'll agree with you there.
I mean, it is going to be absolutely insane. I think this draft has the potential to have the most first-round trades in draft hit. I don't even know what that is. What is that, Tyler? What is the most trades that have ever occurred in the first round of the NFL draft? I mean, I can imagine there being like 5 or 6 trades. You're going to have a lot of... Again, I completely agree with you that you will have teams that will reach for their quarterbacks. But I'm using... I'm using common sense. Like these teams, because quarterback is that position where coaches and owners get infatuated with.
Right. But that's why they'll jump on them.
And it just doesn't seem.
That's why I had 3 of them going in the top 5.
See, then I used logic when I filled out my draft board. So.
Oh, look at it. Because it's like, I have logic on my side. Yeah, but every NFL draft you could say that, logically you do this, but I think NFL teams are made of humans who also fall in love with players.
Right, but I think the idea is that
that's why we had the Ponder, Gabbert, Locker draft.
Which is why you don't pick also on I don't want to say emotionally, but you don't want to necessarily get so connected to a guy that you reach for him because like the guys like the Ponders and the Gabberts and the Lockers of the world are proof that it is a huge risk to take a guy that early because you get scared. A team gets scared that if I don't take this guy now, then I don't have an opportunity to come back and get him later.
But I understand your argument, but that's why I'm actually using that as the opposite argument to say that teams will do that. Because that's the nature of the NFL.
Right.
If you see these top quarterbacks go before you, and you're right there, you can take one. You're just thinking, we experience it when we're playing fantasy. We're drafting players. Like I was getting ready to draft my quarterback last year, and I'm like, look at all these quarterbacks ready, and then boom, 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 all gone right before I got there. And at that point, I had to take a quarterback. I had to take somebody who was on the board.
I just think though, outside of Bortles and Manziel, I seriously think any other quarterback that goes in the top 15, they're reaching. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I don't doubt that a team will go there. A team will. They will. But it'll be stupid.
I guarantee it. It'll
be stupid.
I agree with you there. It might not be the smartest move always,
which is why I have a very bland draft board because I'm trying to think, if they use I shouldn't use the words like logic and reason, but seriously though, you have to kind of take emotions out of the decision. Like you can kind of like really like a guy, but at the same time, like these GMs and these coaches have to come to the realization that if you have needs at other positions and you can somehow find a way, because I think they have to be able to find a way to maximize their team's drafting potential. And I think by making that leap to try and reach for a quarterback is ruining those chances because that is a huge gamble.
But it's also a huge gamble to not jump on the guy you want because he might not be there when you need him, or if you're like I said, planning on all these dominoes to fall. What if one falls?
Well, here's the thing. And again, this is something that no one will be able to predict correctly off the bat. But I mean, you're going to have at maximum, you'll probably have at the most 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. I think that's the most you'll see in this scenario. I think it's more likely 3 or 4 quarterbacks get taken in the first round, but maybe as many as 5. How many of those guys will end up being worth that?
Well, that's the time will tell.
No, that's the gamble. But
sure, but so is any player that you draft. It's a gamble. Thinking you just said it yourself. Jadeveon Clowney has extreme bust potential. He does. The draft is, you put as much logic and study and research into it as possible, but the draft is only a little bit better than a crapshoot. It really is, because any player, Tom Brady was discovered in the 6th round. You know what I mean? Ryan Leaf was taken in the 1st round.
Well, admittedly, though, Brady got his chance on a fluke, though.
Right.
I mean, you just never know.
But okay, here's more points. The 49ers passed up on Aaron Rodgers and went with Alex Smith.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Alex Smith is a bad quarterback, but don't you think if given the chance, the 49ers would have actually drafted Aaron Rodgers if they'd seen what had gone
It's just
down?
one of those things where, because like I said, every player comes in with a certain, draft stock, coming in. And like I said, yeah, you can get a guy well after the 1st round that could be, Pro Bowler, MVP, what have you. I mean, it's rare, but it happens. And more often than not, undrafted guys are the ones that tend to, there are a handful of undrafted guys that end up performing well. But it's just one of those things. Like, I just, it's just gonna be one of those things where when that quarterback run happens, I'm just gonna be shaking.
They're gonna fall quickly, though.
I'm just gonna be shaking my head, because like I said, it'll be one of those scenarios where there is going to be a lot of teams that within 2 or 3 years are gonna be like, shit, we need another quarterback again, and we have the top 10 pick, and the draft won't be nearly as deep. So
I don't think it'll happen exactly that way. I do think that some teams might jump, but I think it'll be because there's no other real logical option at that point. You know what I mean? If Manziel falls past, the Jaguars, I think the Browns have a real debate about whether or not to take him. I think the Raiders have a real debate about whether or not to take him.
Again, it all depends on
I think
where
one of those two will take him.
Again, those first 2 picks will be the ones that decide how the rest of the draft will flow. So, Tyler, did you were able to find an answer on those trades in the 1st round?
No, I was not.
Hi Tyler, you're still here.
Yes.
Well, he was busy away doing research.
I tried every different variant of the phrasing I could think of, but
nothing.
Everything that came up was just going back to we're just talking about possible trades for this year.
Yeah,
so there's no concrete.
Yeah, again, I'm not putting the general manager's cap on. I'm literally looking at this draft from the outside. What do these teams need? Yes, they need quarterback. Some of these teams need quarterbacks, but they have other needs.
I will say, it looked like that. It said that 2012 had the most overall trades, but that's the entire draft, not just
right.
the.
Okay.
I couldn't find anything. But yeah.
Thank you for your comment on our discussion there.
I am just. Gosh.
I was wondering, while in that discussion, I did kind of just zone out on because while I was.
Well, good, because I think Mike and I might have repeated the same points 10 times.
Yeah.
Did
you mention about the popular talk about how since the 49ers have 11 picks to deal with, that they have ammunition to easily jump up?
Oh well, yeah. But the reason
that specifically, but
right. But the 49ers are one of those teams that don't have a whole lot of needs. They could move up if there was a guy on their draft board that they absolutely loved, and they knew they can't get him at 30 or whatever, and they decide they want to move up. Again, I expect there to be a lot of trading and maneuvering in the 1st round because teams are going to want their quarterbacks, teams are going to want their wide receivers, and it's just going to be complete madness, complete and utter madness.
Or is it Sparta?
Huh?
No Trojans are coming here.
That was perfect. That was perfect.
Yeah, I think it's about time we wrap things up, Tyler.
So
wrap this puppy up.
So one last thing. So next week we'll be coming at you with our draft review show.
0 out of 32. 0 out of 32.
Tyler will be the only one here next week.
I'll be very disappointed if I get a pick right. I'll be very disappointed because then I can't come into the draft review show and say, "Yeah, I got none of them right." Okay, so I said it now.
My goal is to like if I can get a third of them right, if I can get 10 of them, I'd be happy.
And so next week we will also be giving ourselves like a quick mock draft scoring grade as far as how we did on our pick predictions and teams.
0 out of 32, A+.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see who actually did the best with their mock drafts, and I think we'll also discuss how the draft unfolded and maybe say what teams made the best decisions, what teams made the worst ones.
If I have a more correct mock draft than either of you two,
I'm not coming in.
No. Not only that, we're going to start up the podcast. You're going to introduce me, and then you're going to watch me walk out. And
I'll be
done. And that's why I'm saying
I'll bring my camera for that moment.
I'm just gonna grab a mic and just go.
I'll just lock the door.
All right.
Okay. So, thank you all for staying here with us. Join in. Make sure you come back next week. Once again, you can follow us on Twitter at Intent Grounding and also our Facebook page, right?
Intentional Grounding.
Facebook
and then on YouTube.
And then YouTube is also Intent Grounding.
There you go.
I mean, I've lost track of how many weeks we've been doing this now, but I think this is something we all should know. Especially if we're rotating on hosting work.
Don't worry.
No, I'm kidding. I'm just.
You guys will screw it up also.
I'm sure. Again, I might just not come in next week just to make sure I don't screw up. I mean, I can't screw up if I'm not here.
Hosting duties are mine. Mine. My precious.
All right, I think this is about time when we left. We're coming off the hinges now.
You should just close it on that one.
All right, well, we'll see you guys all next week. Bye.